In the pre-dawn darkness of April 18, 1906, San Francisco was savagely shaken awake by a violent, relentless earthquake, twisting and heaving the ground, collapsing buildings on unstable foundations, and claiming hundreds of lives. The intense shaking overturned coal stoves and severed the city's gas lines, immediately igniting over 50 fires, while it simultaneously broke the city's water mains, bleeding out the water pressure that firefighters desperately needed to quench the fires. Many survivors sought to escape the city, dragging steamer trunks or loaded down with whatever possessions they could carry. But other survivors ran toward the inferno and crumbling ruins, determined to help with the rescue efforts to save lives and property from the oncoming fire. Who do you think you'd have been in those fateful hours? I'd like to think I've been like Frank A. Leach, the superintendent of the U.S. Branch Mint, whose decisive actions amidst the chaos were about to etch his name into the annals of history. Welcome back to the History of Money. I'm Tom, continuing our exploration into one of the most defining moments in American history, the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, and the remarkable story of how Superintendent Frank Leach saved the San Francisco Mint. In part 1, we traced Leach's heroic steps as he navigated from his Oakland home through a city engulfed in flames, striving to reach and protect the San Francisco Mint and the $300 million in gold reserves held within its vaults. We also followed my own journey in 2023, seeking to connect with the past by exploring the historical traces of that fateful day, from the West Oakland neighborhood where his house once stood to the ferry across the San Francisco Bay. So if you already haven't watched part 1, I strongly recommend you do that by clicking on that link right there. Now, in part 2, let's delve deeper into Superintendent Leach's crisis management at the Mint during the firestorm, and how he and his team fought against overwhelming odds to save this crucial institution. We'll also explore the Mint as it stands today, revealing the scars from the past and the resilience embodied in its walls. Parallel to this, our journey takes us to the serene Mountain View Cemetery, searching for Leach's final resting place. Finally, we'll return to the broader implications of that infamous earthquake and fire for the rarity of 1906 coins and what history can teach us about disaster preparedness and the importance of having a resilient spirit. Join me as we continue to unravel the intertwined stories of courage and survival and the histories they hold for us today on the History of Money. As I mentioned last time, Frank Leach resided in Oakland and was in his bed when the estimated 7.9 earthquake struck at 5:12 a.m. on April 18, 1906. Across the bay, a few dozen of the Granite Lady's 150 employees had worked the graveyard shift, and their workday was winding down just before sunrise that Wednesday morning. In a letter to his brother 3 weeks later, one employee, Joe Hamill, recalled being suddenly, quote, thrown in every direction. The 47 seconds of violent shaking toppled most of the Mint's furniture, and the whole building, including its thick granite foundation, moved 2 feet to the south. Apart from one of the chimneys cracked at the top, the structure itself suffered nothing significant. Shortly after the shaking stopped, the crew spotted fires springing up in the neighborhoods around them. Night Supervisor T.W. Hawes instructed the men to close and lock the iron security shutters on the Mint's ground floor windows. The human toll was greatest here, south of Market, where the structures were cheap lodging houses and hotels, and it had only taken a few hours for the fire to spread through the many blocks east of here. One of the initial fires, that finally merged with others in making the general conflagration, started a block below the Mint on 5th Street in a rickety frame building used as a boarding house. It was partially thrown down by the force of the earthquake shocks. A stove in which a fire had been started to cook breakfast was upset, and the red-hot coals, when spilled out, set fire to the place. Firemen quickly appeared on the scene while the flames were yet small, and could have easily been extinguished if any water could have been obtained from the hydrants. They could only stand by and watch the fire grow into an uncontrollable demon of blaze. Heroic groups of firemen and citizens formed to rescue those trapped in fallen buildings, but the advancing fires forced one group after another to fall back and watch the crumbled buildings turn into funeral pyres. A man who had been dragged by rescuers from a lodging house on Folsom Street told of a conversation he had heard between 2 others who were trapped in the wreckage. He heard one say, "I'm not hurt, but there's a beam across my back, and I can't get out from under it." The other answered, "I'm caught too. It's my wrist, but don't worry, they'll get us out." Before the splintered timbers that covered them could be cleared away, the fire drove the rescuers into retreat. They could do nothing but stand by helplessly and watch the fire engulf the wreckage and then pass on to leave a smoking drift of ashes. The Mint's occupants were helpless witnesses that morning to the fire that swept through south of Mission Street. In an extraordinary stroke of foresight, Leach had recently installed a comprehensive fire suppression system throughout the Mint, complete with hydrants and hoses on each floor, and 2 large cisterns in the courtyard. This was a measure intended for combating internal fires, but now it became a critical defense against this external assault. It was only about 10 days before the great disaster struck that the last fire hydrants were installed on the roof, supplied by an artisan well that survived the quake. The shaking, however, had damaged the Mint's water pump. As the men scrambled to repair it, Hawes directed the men to douse the fires around the building with barrels of acid that were used in the minting process. After an hour, the Mint was surrounded by small fires to the east and the south when the Mint's engineer, Jack Brady, heroically repaired the earthquake-damaged steam pump and restored their vital water supply just in time. The powerful steam pump in the boiler room could now deliver a good stream of water to any part of the roof. This was a welcome development, but Hawes needed more help, and San Francisco firemen were nowhere in sight. Worried the criminal gangs from the city's notorious Barbary Coast might attack the Mint and loot its vaults, San Francisco's ranking military officer, Brigadier General Frederick Funston, dispatched Lieutenant G.W. Armstrong of the 6th Infantry and his squad of artillerymen, initially serving more as guards than firefighters. Among early responders that morning were some day-shift Mint employees who lived nearby and increased the Mint's defenders to around 60 men before Market Street was sealed off by soldiers. Burning ash rained down on the Mint that morning, where considerable lumber was stacked on the roof to build new water tanks. The old tanks had been taken down, sawed up into firewood, and thrown off into the courtyard, making a rubbish pile there. Hawes instructed the Mint's reinforcements to throw all the lumber down from the roof, as well as flammable items like furniture and paper from the upper floors, into the courtyard so that there would be less to catch fire in the building's most vulnerable areas. By 9 a.m., Superintendent of Machinery Mr. McLaughlin and Captain Hawes had done all they could to secure the Mint. Their swift actions, coupled with the Mint's isolation from adjacent structures, had so far prevented the fire from spreading directly to it. Refugees had been fleeing east toward the Mint all morning, hoping for safe harbor, but were all turned away by the soldiers on duty. Around noon, the fire's destructive path had arrived at the Granite lady's doorstep. Many of the small buildings directly opposite the Mint building on 5th Street, Frank noted, had already been destroyed by the flames, and the fire was slowly eating its way northerly toward the Metropolitan Temple and Lincoln School building. Besides, from the center of that same block, it was working its way more rapidly toward the big Emporium building. Another branch of the flames had swept the buildings on the south side of Mission and was crossing Mission heading for Market Street, clearly signaling destruction for all the big buildings west and north of the Mint. As Leach took charge of his brave crew, he soberly assessed the situation. He applauded Hawes' excellent judgment in all he had done thus far, and Leach felt proud of his band of faithful men. Their resolve was unwavering to the last man, even as some knew their own homes lay in the path of the fire. On the roof, Leach surveyed the thick wall of convection-driven smoke and glowing ash rapidly advancing towards them. "Our position looked rather perilous," he wrote later in his memoir. "It did not seem probable that the structure could withstand the terrific mass of flames sweeping down upon us." Leach divided the men into 4 squads, positioning them on all 4 corners of the roof, and he also instructed them to douse the building's interior with water, especially the window frames and mahogany woodwork. On the 2nd and 3rd floors, where the hoses couldn't reach, the staff was organized into bucket brigades to combat the flames. If they had to abandon the Mint to preserve their own lives, Leach kept an escape plan to himself, hoping it would not come to that. The block to the south of them, having been fully consumed early in the day, presented an open space to retreat to, like cattle in a vast corral, until a fire subsided enough to make their way out. But for now, their focus was on the battle at hand, and they didn't have to wait long. Leach had just finished positioning the men when a dense black smoke engulfed the building, plunging them into complete darkness just ahead of the approaching flames. Shortly after, as the Windsor Hotel and other big buildings to the north of them on Market Street caught fire, a tremendous shower of red-hot cinders and burning debris rained down upon the building, piling up in large drifts on the roof 2 feet deep for 20 feet. Much of the fodder in the courtyard, open to the sky, caught fire as embers from the size of a walnut to a bowling ball rained down, quote, like hail. Flames had finally breached the Mint's walls. They all knew that if they failed to contain the dozen fires in the courtyard, the Mint would be lost. As soon as the bucket brigades extinguished one blaze, a new shower of cinders ignited another. At the height of this round of the fight, Leach came out to show a soldier handling one of the hoses in the courtyard how to maximize the water stream's effectiveness. When he returned indoors, Leach noticed that his clothing and hat were scorched by the falling cinders. The difficulty they had keeping the fire from establishing a beachhead in the courtyard greatly increased his fear that their Granite Lady was doomed to destruction. Sometime in the early afternoon their luck turned, probably due to a shift in the wind, and the burning cinders abated. By this time everything in the courtyard was drenched, so Leach, aware that the fiercest challenge was yet to come, moved to the upper floors of the Mint. The Mint's north side faced a narrow alley, and the fire to the west had spread north toward Market Street, and had engulfed structures like Hales and the Windsor Hotel. This conflagration to the north ignited the tall apartment building across Mint Alley with a roaring fury, with fires shooting up 200 feet against the north wall. Quote, "Great masses of flames shot against the side of our building," Leach wrote, "as if directed against us by a huge blowpipe. The extreme heat was so intense that the glass in our windows," Leach continued, "did not crack and break, but melted down like butter." Porous, layered, and multi-mineral stone, when rapidly heated to high temperatures, can have moisture trapped in the pores, which flashes into steam, suddenly cracking or spalling with explosive force. The Mint's sandstone veneer on the north face created thunderous explosions, like deafening detonations of 13-inch artillery shells against the walls. Leach recalled the terrifying sounds. The conflagration's roar, the crashing of buildings, and our exploding stones could have struck terror into our hearts. The concussions were so severe that they made the floors quiver. At one point, the noise was so loud and heavy, I thought a part of the northern wall and roof had given way. Here we are standing at the Mint today, and the front facade faces east, and the large space for the lawn, shrubbery, and palm trees is still here, setting the building back quite away from the street. You could see how 5th Street made a good wide fire break, as well as Mission Street. East of us across 5th Street is where the Metropolitan Temple burned, as well as the Lincoln School. To the south, the San Francisco Chronicle relocated its headquarters here in 1924. Leach spoke of loud concussions during his firefight at the Mint. In addition to the exploding stones, today we know that the south side of Market Street from 12th Street west to the powerhouse at Valencia had been dynamited during the afternoon, and probably accounted for the loudest and heaviest concussions. The south side of Mission had already been completely razed before Frank's arrival that afternoon, so let's go around to the north side. So if you've been to Yellowstone National Park, then Old Faithful Geyser's eruptions of up to 184 feet can help visualize the 200-foot flames that assaulted the north side of the Mint here, making this the most vulnerable side. Also, some original sandstone blocks both here and in the courtyard bear the scars of the explosive spalling from the ferocity of the flames. Down here on the ground floor you can see the iron shutters inside, which were warped from the heat. Wow, I could truly appreciate the ordeal faced by Leach, and how the fate of the entire structure was determined here. The climax of the battle against the Inferno had arrived. Would their efforts be enough to thwart the encroaching flames, or would they be forced to abandon the building to its fiery fate? With the glass melted away, Leach watched great tongues of flame surge through the open windows, igniting the interior woodwork. Yet every man was unwavering in their resolve. With hoses and buckets, they bravely charged into the smoke-choked rooms to douse the flames, confronting heat so fierce that it scorched their skin. In relays, they endured the veritable furnaces for as long as they could hold their breaths, and then blindly groped their way out to be relieved by another crew of willing fighters. Joe Hamill, assigned to the team on the roof, later described the perilous situation. The possibility of another earthquake loomed, threatening to bring down the chimneys upon us. In the refinery at the building's top northwest corner, we faced the onslaught. The roar was deafening as buildings collapsed, and our own walls burst explosively. We battled at the windows until they melted away, the flames and the smoke nearly overpowering us. So far, the Mint's treasure lay safe in its basement vaults. But now, Hamill wrote, it appeared that the Mint was doomed. Leach, too, feared the worst. Just when they seemed to be gaining the upper hand, a dense black, choking smoke surged, overwhelmed them, and forced them into retreat. Some, their lungs seared by the smoke, had to withdraw to the lower levels. Yet, in an unexpected turn, the smoke cleared as swiftly as it had enveloped them. Seizing this opportunity, the men, buoyed by a sudden surge of hope, cheered triumphantly and plunged back into the fray. They were gaining ground in the fight when someone informed Leach that the roof had caught fire, and the flames were escalating beyond the control of the men up there, who only now had buckets at their disposal. Leach made a pivotal decision and relayed the message that they still needed the hose on the third floor for a bit longer. He knew that the roof would burn slowly since it was covered with copper roofing plates, so as soon as they were no longer in danger at this location, he assured them they would douse the roof trusses from below in the attic. The explosions of the stones in the walls grew fainter and finally ceased altogether, and although the heat from the north side was unbearable and they couldn't see the situation outside, they remained undeterred, sensing that their efforts were starting to turn the tide. Finally, they were keeping the interiors of the most threatened rooms wet with the bucket men. With the situation inside stabilized, Leach directed the hose team up to the roof, and their quick action extinguished the flames there. In a half hour or so, the defensive work was mostly over, so Leach made the rounds to take some observations. He discovered that with careful watching and preventing the lodgment of new cinders, there would be no further danger of the Mint being destroyed. The fight was won. The Mint was saved. It was now near 5 o'clock in the evening, and the fire had moved on past them, having consumed absolutely everything around the Mint, and moved on to other parts of the city. When they felt it was safe, they opened the front doors of the Mint and stepped outside. Leach, astonished, remarked, "I shall never forget the feeling that came over me as I descended the steps of the Mint building into 5th Street and noticed the change that had taken place there within a few short hours. When I passed down that block on 5th Street from Market in the morning, all the large business blocks, the Metropolitan Temple, and the Lincoln School were intact. The soldiers, policemen, firemen, and privileged citizens moving to and fro then gave animation to the scene. But now, turn which way you would, the view presented was one of utter ruin, desolation, and loneliness. The buildings just described were piles of smoking and blazing ruins. The street was encumbered with fallen trolley poles and tangled wires and other indestructible debris from the burned buildings. Not a human being was to be seen. It seemed as if all the people and buildings of the city, but the Mint and its defenders, had been destroyed. It was a most depressing scene of desolation. Then they turned around and looked at their reward, the Mint itself. It was blackened by soot and battered by flames, but it was still standing, a lone sentinel among the devastation. Their determination and bravery had saved their Granite Lady and the treasure she guarded deep in her bosom. There is nothing to turn to. The very ground upon which all has been based is rising and falling like the waves of the ocean beyond, and the shrieks of the piercing and the pinned mingle with the weeping of the homeless and childless and fatherless. Nature has plotted well. She has cut the arteries of protection against fire, and the blazing demon leaps and dances through walls and high-built battlements of stone as though they were paper. So awful is the task that earth itself still trembles at the thought of all that is. A sick sun looks down on the ruins. According to the official 1906 USGS report, one of the interior walls was weakened by a break in the sewer which ran underneath it, and one of the chimneys was cracked at the top. This structure, which is located at the intersection of two wide streets, is built on soft alluvium, but rests upon substantial pile foundation. The bearing walls were of solid brick faced with granite, the northwest facade of which was badly spalled by the fire. The floors consisted of brick arches between steel beams finished in cement. The doors and windows were of wood glazed with plate glass, the windows on the first and second floors being fitted with folding inside iron shutters. The roof and northwest side of the third story caught fire from without, but an independent supply of water from an artesian well was used to prevent the fire from gaining a foothold, and the building was but slightly damaged. Tracing the footsteps of Frank Leach brought me to Mountain View Cemetery, a place of both historical significance and serene beauty. With about 200,000 individuals interred over its 220 acres, this cemetery is an expression of that city's people preserving their collective memory. Well, at least I know I'm in the right spot. I thought they said it was along this edge, so alright, keep looking. The search was not straightforward. The serene paths and historic monuments were captivating, but Leach's marker eluded me. I found markers with the name Leach, but they were not the ones I sought. As the time I had ticked away, I resolved to return, determined to pay my respects. After the grueling fight was over, some of the men were badly blistered with the heat, and so blinded with the smoke they could hardly see. The struggle with the fire demon had lasted from early morning, but despite their exhaustion, no relief crew was obtainable. So Frank Leach divided them into watches, which gave some of them the first opportunity to obtain a little rest. The watch on duty was stationed at the exposed places, the hose lines were stretched, filled buckets were placed in convenient places, and steam pressure in the boiler room was ordered to be kept up so that fire pumps could be started at a moment's notice if needed. When all the preparations and plans for the night had been arranged, Leach returned to Oakland to send a report to the director of the Mint in Washington, as he knew the authorities there would be pleased to know that the building had been saved. The firestorm raged all night, and was still burning northward through Chinatown when he returned the next morning. He was greeted by a great number of his other employees who, yesterday, did their best to reach the building, knowing that their services were needed, but had been turned back by the coordinated efforts of soldiers and police. For 3 days, the fires burned west to Van Ness, south to the Mission District, and north to Fisherman's Wharf. The timeline I used to show the progress of the fire past the Mint on the first day continues to show how it kept consuming and consuming until finally it burned out upon reaching the water, working hydrants, or the dynamited fire break along Van Ness. Despite surviving the fire, the Mint still wasn't out of danger. When city officials began cleanup efforts, they assigned teams in the burned district to demolish brick ruins with dynamite and clear debris to reopen the streets. Dynamiters, inexperienced with explosives, operated on the flawed logic that more dynamite equal better results. Their first major demolition of the Oddfellows building caused extensive collateral damage to the nearby post office. The Mint suffered too, losing every window to the shockwaves of the blast. Debris from another explosion almost a quarter-mile away landed in the Mint's courtyard. Leach was alarmed by the recklessness of these actions and raised his concern with the military under General Funston, and offered to provide experts in explosives for safe and efficient work, but his concerns and offers were ignored. He then communicated his protest to Mayor Schmitz, who responded positively, promising to address the issue. However, the individual responsible for the dynamiting, who visited Leach the next day, showed a defiant attitude, ignored Leach's concerns, and intended to proceed with the planned demolition of the nearby Emporium building. Leach was certain that the walls of the Emporium building posed no danger to traffic, and felt that using dynamite on them was unnecessary and harmful. He reiterated his concerns to General Funston, who then sent a colonel empowered to act on his behalf. Leach explained that the continuous explosions on Market Street were causing significant damage to the Mint, endangering lives, and halting necessary repairs. Initially, the colonel dismissed these concerns until a huge blast at the old Phelan block occurred. This explosion, almost a quarter of a mile away, showered the area with debris, causing severe vibrations and a frightening crash of falling glass in the Mint building. The colonel involuntarily ducked for cover, as if reliving a past battlefield experience. Upon regaining his composure, he very gentlemanly acknowledged his error and promptly ordered a stop to the excessive demolition near the Mint. Meanwhile, in my quest to find Frank Leach's final resting place, I ventured beyond the indicated section 14C to explore 14A. I'm in plot 14, and I see the right kind of stone up there. Let's see if that's it. Oh, yes, that's it. Finally. Yeah, Leach. Here we go. Harry L. Earl, Lucy Hennessy, Franklin, Harry Earl, Harry, wife of, and in loving memory of Frank Alamon Leach, 1846 to 1929. Yeah, it was on the other side from where I thought it was. Here it is. So there's the hill, and and there's the pyramid right there. Hooray! And Mary Louise Leach, that was his wife, and Edwin W., his father, 1824 to 1899. That is a beautiful monument. Oh gosh, I found it! Hooray! You know, Leach's account is remarkably humble and is equally a testament to the resilience and dedication of the Mint's staff. His narrative is a story of survival against the odds, and it's an exploration of the complexities of disaster response. He highlights the importance of preparation, the challenges of execution, and the human spirit's capacity for bravery and sacrifice. When I think of how he responded with such practical and direct action, considering the overwhelming and changing circumstances, I know that I would have much to learn from his leadership skills. In the wake of this devastating fire that swept through, the city grappled with a myriad of challenges, one of the most pressing being the need to circulate relief money. The destruction of the city's banks had left many, including the affluent, without access to their funds. In response, an ingenious solution was devised in collaboration with the officials at the Mint. Banks rapidly set up emergency offices, often in the homes of their directors or presidents. Despite lacking crucial records, they operated on trust. Depositors who were recognized by bank officers were given special drafts countersigned and payable at the Mint. These drafts, exchangeable for gold specie up to $500, were a lifeline in a city where gold was the preferred currency. While initial skepticism from out-of-town banks hinted at a potential financial panic, such fears never materialized. San Francisco's status as a creditor city with significant deposits in Eastern banks played a pivotal role in stabilizing the situation. Remarkably, within just 6 weeks, every San Francisco banking house resumed operations, some even building temporary structures atop their old vaults. A vibrant commercial spirit reemerged. Street vendors, restaurateurs, blacksmiths, and safe experts quickly adapted to the new landscape, catering to the immediate needs of a city in rebirth. This was clearly a city of people replete with resilience and financial acumen. The handling of safes in the aftermath was particularly noteworthy. Drawing lessons from past disasters in Chicago and Baltimore, San Franciscans approached their safes with patience. Unlike those previous disasters where hasty openings led to the incineration of safe contents, San Francisco's safes were methodically cracked after a cooling period. This prudent approach ensured that the contents, ranging from slightly singed to perfectly preserved, survived the ordeal. Standing at the headstone of Frank Leach in the Mountain View Cemetery, I'm surrounded by sculpted monuments dedicated to the memories of loved ones. Each marker here tells a story of love, loss, and remembrance. Although I never knew Frank personally, visiting his grave allows me to connect with him and his legacy in a profound way. There's definitely a sense of family and continuity here. Frank Leach's memorial marker highlights the tangible connection that we can have with history. I get the same feeling from the coins I own. They remind me that behind every historical event are individuals whose lives and actions ripple through time, influencing the present in ways both big and small. Remarkably, the San Francisco Mint, affectionately known as the Granite Lady, resumed operations shortly after the 1906 disaster, once city gas lines were restored. Contrary to expectations that the earthquake and fire would significantly impact coin production, the Mint's output in 1906 turned out to be more of a hallmark of its operational efficiency than a reflection of disaster-induced rarity. For gold coinage, the Mint increased $20 double eagle production by 14% over 1905 numbers. Over 2 million new coins that came to be known as, quote, Reconstruction money, and which were vital in rebuilding the city. Additionally, the mintage of the $10 eagle at 457,000 increased 24% from 1905 to 1906, and $5 half eagle production was only a third less at 598,000 minted. In terms of silver coinage, the Mint struck an average number of dimes, 3.1 million, and half dollars, 1.7 million, though no quarters were minted in San Francisco that year. However, the year did see a numismatic rarity, the Philippine peso. With silver prices rising, these 90% silver coins were often melted down. Despite producing over 200,000 pesos in 1906, most were withheld from circulation due to an impending reduction in size and weight for the 1907 issue, which led to their melting and being recoined. The resilience of the Granite Lady in 1906 and its ability to continue decent coinage production amidst such turmoil underscores an important numismatic truth. Coinage is often more influenced by human response and conditions than by natural forces themselves. In addition to its financial role, the Granite Lady quickly evolved into a refugee village and a center for relief aid. Historic photographs, such as this one capturing two men receiving shaves in a makeshift barbershop in front of the old Mint, show that having an uncontaminated water source right after the fire made the Mint a natural congregation point for relief aid. There's something so civilized about getting a fresh shave. Psychologically, I would feel more ready and able to restore civilization here. In 2006, marking the centennial of the earthquake, President George W. Bush authorized the production of special commemorative coins, a silver dollar and a gold half eagle. The reverses featured the eagle designs from the 1904 silver dollar and the 1906 half eagle respectively. The obverse designs featured the Granite Lady's architecture and inscriptions acknowledging the historical significance of the Mint and its pivotal role in the city's recovery and rebuilding efforts. The pricing of these commemorative strikes included surcharges that were forwarded to the San Francisco Historical Society. The goal was to raise funds for a new museum in the old Mint building, preserving and celebrating the rich history of the city at this iconic institution. While plans for the museum did not materialize as envisioned, this tribute succeeded in honoring the enduring legacy of the Granite Lady and her role in one of the most challenging periods in San Francisco's history. If you've been enjoying this exploration of history, then be sure to subscribe so that you can be informed when, Lord willing, I release the next video. In the aftermath, sensational stories of lawlessness proliferated. No Barbary Coast gangs had attacked the Mint, although reports of looters being shot trying to rob the Mint, and of soldiers hanging their own for looting, were products of sensationalist journalism of the era. Contrary to these tales, the city's response was marked by solidarity and human tenderness in the face of tragedy. The judge Ike Harris reflected on that trial as an embodiment, quote, of a brotherhood of man such as I wish would come without tragedy, unquote. This truth debunks the nightmarish dystopian myths of inevitable societal collapse in the face of disaster. The earthquake's impact was often described by eyewitnesses as an apocalyptic upheaval. Yet, amidst this devastation, every account exhibited the unwavering belief in the city's rebirth and future greatness. This unity in adversity is not unique to San Francisco. American history is full of stories that demonstrate this inherent generous spirit of the American people, especially in times of need. We U.S. citizens have repeatedly shown that in the face of disaster, a free people can unite to accomplish great deeds with extraordinary charity and selflessness. My journey to find Frank Leach's grave offered a unique perspective on life. It prompted me to appreciate being alive, to evaluate my priorities, and to be grateful for those memorialized there who came and left before I was even born. This brings me to an intriguing thought experiment regarding how we view our own mortality. The reaction to unfolding tragedy, whether in running towards danger to help or in approaching a cemetery with curiosity instead of fear, reveals much about our perspective on life and death. Facing the reality of life's impermanence is a powerful motivator, driving us to live with purpose and urgency. Just as firefighters describe their calling to face danger as part of their duty, our journey through life can be guided by a similar commitment to the greater good. They often speak of training, teamwork, and preparedness as essential, but it's their discipline and their dedication that truly define their courage. The mentality of preparing to face peril for the sake of others is a powerful testament to the profound impact that anyone can have. Our mortality defines us. It gives us drive and purpose. Faced with a life-threatening choice, do we stay safe or do we take a leap of faith and help those in need? This momentary decision is the best witness to our character and values. Life is fleeting, and we are not promised tomorrow. Are you living a life that, when reflected upon, people would undoubtedly say was spent making a meaningful difference, just as Frank Leach's was? As we reflect on the lessons of the 1906 San Francisco earthquake and other similar tragedies, you might be asking yourself, how can I be ready for a huge disaster? Hopefully, your answer lies not in hoarding material goods, but in preparing yourself mentally and physically for any eventuality. No possession is worth a human life. When calamity strikes, your amassed possessions could vanish in an instant. No. True preparedness is about honing skills and drills, being ready to act swiftly, and shifting your focus from material possessions to the welfare of others. In this process, you will become truly valuable, and you can find your true worth and life's purpose. As we look toward the future, uncertain of what it may hold, this story should focus us on acquiring life-saving skills and preparing to extend our talents and resources to those in dire need.
Very strong and is fighting with us for second place.
Let's strive to be ready, not just in terms of physical preparations, but in our willingness to help and support each other. When we meditate on the legacy of 1906's coins, let us remember our true value lies not in what we have, but in what we can do for others. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of history, resilience, and the human spirit. Until next time, in God we trust.